What is actually inherent of women is that they can't be easily manipulated. Why? Because women are biologically designed to deal with stress and pain better than men. I would say that men are probably easier to emotionally manipulate than women, or else they wouldn't be culpable for 92% of violent crimes. We could emotionally manipulate a man by making him lose a game of Fortnite. The next thing we know, there's 3 holes in his walls. Then tell me why men commit 92% of violent crimes. Tell me why they're more likely to self-unalive, commit suicide. So you think that testosterone is what makes men more emotional?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then you just conceded the debate.
No, I didn't concede.
You just said...
I always wonder how dumb this goyim sometimes can be.
It was a PR disaster for the right, much like the video with Mehdi Hasan debating the so-called far right and Dave Rubin debating other liberals.
So what's the main metric that he made better off?
What?
What's the main metric that he made better off? GDP, unemployment, inflation? Do you have any idea?
Listen.
Well, reviews of the episode have not been kind. Conservative pundit Dave Rubin, branded a complete imbecile, reported the UK's independent newspaper. MAGA host mocked after failing to name any of Trump's achievements, said the Daily Beast. Commentator Mehdi Hasan declared it's official, Dave Rubin is the dumbest man in right-wing media.
The video ironically proved Dean Withers's antithesis, which is that women suck in politics. Now, I think most people in my audience already knew that beforehand, but in case you didn't, here's a research showing that women are multiple standard deviations lower than men on general and political knowledge. You wouldn't want to hand the keys to the country to people who can barely clear the basic competence bar, right? And the video just demonstrates it perfectly well, with a bunch of low-class MAGA women who came across as confused and unprepared.
Men are strong just like Trump. First 100 days, what did he do? Why?
Jesus Christ. Okay.
No.
So just to clarify, you don't think men are better at leading than women?
No.
The nature of this surrounded episode is where we have disagreeers in the hot seat?
I actually agree with you.
And why are you in the chair?
We need strong alpha males like Donald J. Trump, Spencer Pratt, and our loved Charlie Kirk, who will have secure borders.
Of course, when you're faced against this demographic, Dean Withers predictably comes on top. As a result, millions of people watching the video were convinced by his arguments. They thought they were true, which is exactly why I am responding to this video. Now, I actually wrote a full breakdown of Dean Withers' argument on my Substack, but before you go and read it, here's what actually bothers me the most. There are 3 honest ways to argue that 2 groups perform equally. 1, show that the data says that they perform the same. 2, show that the data is too noisy to conclude anything. And 3, show that while Group A overperforms Group B in one trait, Group B outperforms Group A on another, which leads to the conclusion that 2 populations are comparatively similar. Withers does none of these. He presents evidence that favors one group and then concludes for equality. Now, this is a standard tactic of left-wing racial identity politics, and not just racial but also gender, in which the left explicitly proclaims that it believes in equality, but implicitly makes the argument for white inferiority and the superiority of non-whites through media, culture, and legislation. In reality, black and brown men commit a disproportionate amount of rapes and violent crime, but the left blames it on white men regardless and explicitly states that there are no group differences in crime. But irrespective of Dean's dishonesty, the arguments themselves still deserve an examination, because if women genuinely are superior leaders, then an honest truth seeker has an obligation to report on that, regardless of how uncomfortable that is. I do not get to dismiss evidence simply because I dislike where it points towards. That would make me no different from left-wing ideologues like Dan Withers. Now, his biggest move is redefining the word emotional. He says that men are more emotional than women because men commit more violent crime, which is true.
Well, when a man gets mad, he commits a violent crime, he kills his wife, he kidnaps his children, he sets his house ablaze, and this is why men are significantly more likely to commit every single crime on the books, including crimes.
But violence is simply one facet of emotion, although it is worth clarifying that sometimes violence can be cold. It doesn't have to be impulsive. Here's what the actual research shows. Women score higher on neuroticism, which is the most emotional character trait you can have, and by far this is the largest gender difference among big 5 personality traits. Also, neuroticism is the worst character trait for you to possibly have, as it contributes heavily to diseases of the mind like anxiety, which again ranks pretty high among women. Ironically enough, the second biggest gender difference is agreeableness, which is something that is not correlated with leadership skills. Furthermore, women score higher on shame, fear, and disgust, greater emotional intensity across all emotions, including anger, and lower resilience under stressful conditions. These are traits that matter under leadership pressure. And most importantly, women tend to experience emotions more intensely, which is why they are often accused of being emotional. Research shows that they cannot hold composure when everything is on fire, and this is why you rarely see women in leadership roles.
I would say that men are probably easier to emotionally manipulate than women, or else they wouldn't be culpable for 92% of violent crimes. We could emotionally manipulate a man by making him lose a game of Fortnite. The next thing we know, there's 3 holes in his walls.
Just a little side note I noticed while reading the transcript, he's essentially saying that men commit violent crime because they are easily emotionally manipulated. Right, so not only is he making a completely separate claim that men are more easily emotionally manipulated, which is like completely not true, just throwing stuff out there, but the fact that men commit crimes as such is a result of emotional manipulation by presumably women. So next time a feminist is going to complain about legitimate abuse which is coming from men, you can just say if women weren't so emotionally manipulative, maybe men would become less violent than women, which is like completely false on its head, but for trolling purposes may actually be the case because violence is expressed differently among the genders. The statistics with 92% of men committing violent crime comes from a insignificant group of men, whereas the majority of women do engage in verbal aggression like gaslighting or ostracization. It's complicated. Obviously, we don't want violent criminals to be our leaders, but we don't want professional gaslighters either. So, Dean Withers, you can take your good boy points and shove it up your ass. In the following segment, inside the alternative universe of Dean Withers, he goes to spew more nonsense as if it is already proven beyond shadow of a doubt that men are more emotional than women. Now, his explanation for the essentialist female superiority at controlling their emotions better than men, I kid you not, is because they can give birth.
Than men to deal with stress. It is proven by the science.
That's actually not true.
No, I'll tell you. You could look this up. Anybody at home could look this up. Women have thicker dendrites in their brain, and study after study after study has concluded time and time and time again that this gives women the ability to better manage their stress than men. And you actually brought this up. You brought up childbirth.
Funny enough, he even managed to get fact check on that by Jubilee. Then Dean Withers also claimed that men's natural overrepresentation in leadership positions like CEOs is because of social pressures and not because of innate biological ability. He cited the fact that despite there being much fewer female surgeons, patients undergoing a surgery by a female had lower risks of complications.
That if you're operated on by a female compared to a male in the operating room at a hospital, that you're less likely to die or to experience any post-negative operative outcomes. Why? Because women are biologically designed to deal with stress and pain better than men.
In my Substack article, I gave him this one, and let's say it's real. Female surgeons do have a slightly better patient outcomes, but here's Withers' logical error. Surgery selects for consciousness, precision, protocol following, like obeying what you were told. And these traits skew female, and that's exactly why female surgeons outperform on these specific metrics. Leadership is a different trait cluster. It's risk tolerance under incomplete information, decisiveness when the cost of being wrong is total, dominance seeking in competitive hierarchies, and other male specific traits. You cannot generalize from better at surgery to better at leading. That's not how trait distribution work. Anyways, after I published the Substack article indicating that women do appear to do marginally better than men on surgery, a subscriber of mine reached out to me and said that there's actually newer and more accurate data, dismissing my meta-analysis, saying that it had a poor p-score and the difference was really negligible. But honestly, I don't care either way. Like, females doing slightly better on surgery is statistically probable. And the honest assessment of what the data shows is that men and women have different personalities and abilities. Leadership requires both an ability and a specific personality. The top 1% of female leaders outperform the bottom 97% of men. There's no debate, maybe even 98%. But that's not the question. The question is where the median lands. And also, I guess, where the top percent is. My argument is that the median man outperforms roughly 85% of women on leadership-relevant traits: risk tolerance, political knowledge, stress dominance, hierarchy seeking, etc., etc. Withers should know that, which is why he never argues about medians or top 1% of trait distribution. He instead argues for exceptions like female surgeons, cortisol studies, fake by the way, and individual anecdotes. What he refuses to engage is trait-level data. What traits and behaviors predict leadership performance, and at what level, and how that is distributed across sex. That's the argument. So next time you hear arguments like women are better than men under stressful conditions, or women are less prone to emotional manipulations, you're not engaging with an honest arbiter, right? You are engaging with an ideologue whose worldview is built on false premises which easily crumble under minimal scrutiny, as we have just shown in this video. And the very fact that so few people in the comments have even noticed this speaks volumes to the quality of the voters, which then are going to vote in the elections, which is exactly why I argue for issuing voting licenses based on political knowledge in my manifesto. More than anything, this video proves that the audience can easily be manipulated by manipulators who don't know what the hell they're talking about. This is sort of like the reverse Candace Owens, but for libtards. So once again, complete embarrassment, total aura loss for the right and everyone who got convinced by Dean Withers. Thanks for watching, and wait for my next video on how evil the boomers are.